everybody. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Grilled. Today I'm joined by MPP Jennifer French, the Shadow Councillor of Infrastructure and the MPP for the Oshawa area. We discuss school closures, weak broadband out in the region, and also some games at home and things to do during your downtime. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and I had a really good time with this one. So thank you very much for joining me today, Jennifer. It's excellent to meet you and to be able to talk to you about what's going on. I was actually wanting to start today with just a question about your general day-to-day and how things are going for you right now. I know stuff has changed a lot for everybody, so what's your situation looking like?
Well, it's ever changing, but some of the things that are becoming the new normal, get up really early in the morning and you're already behind. You've already missed a whole whack of emails, and I head down to my basement where I've set up a little workspace, and I'm doing my best to keep up with the information that comes in. So we hear from community businesses, we hear from individuals, we hear from families. Sometimes it's, at the beginning it was sort of more of the panic as we were all figuring things out as it was unfolding. Now a lot more it's based on government announcements and things that people are looking for clarifications or whatnot. And my staff, they're all working from home, so they're handling all of the emails and all of the phone calls, and we're doing our best to gather all the information, connect it sort of to the team, and make recommendations and put packets of suggestions to the government. I've had a number of calls with ministry folks and the ministers on specific local issues that of course are not just local, they're across the province. So they're busy days, and I can't complain too much. I am able to safely work from home, and I'm in my basement beside my patio door, and I can look out and see spring starting. So there's a little bit of hope that comes with that.
For sure. And it sounds like a great setup. I know everyone's kind of doing different things. Natalie from the Whippy Chamber has established a kitchen office, which is very cool. So just repurposing different sections of your house. With working from home, are you finding any challenges?
Well, I think what I'm hearing from other people, and I can relate, the work-life balance, there is no work-life balance. Everything is work-life. It is, for folks who are navigating this with families and small children and trying to figure out how to parent, how to handle the requirements of the job and working from home, working remotely, also dealing with curriculum in school and supporting people who they love that they can't see. I mean, there are so many pieces that keep all of us so busy, and just it's putting a lot of interesting stress and pressure on people. And I think that if we all acknowledge that we are going through, very different things, but all of that in common, there aren't divides. You don't necessarily get up and go to work. I get up and I decide if it's going to be I have to have a shower and do my hair and my makeup because I'm going to be on a video call, or if it's just put the hair in a ponytail, go downstairs and bang out 14 hours and nobody has to see me. But there isn't sort of the lunch break. There isn't the chance to sort of leave the work, because all of it needs to get done, and there's so much at stake. So
for sure. 14-hour days are pretty intense as an entrepreneur. I know that I have to pull stuff like that pretty weekly, and I think it's never good for your health. There's so many articles that have been written previously about how important having a break is. So I appreciate all you're doing for us.
And we know that, but we're all doing it, no matter what sector I talk to, whether, as you said, entrepreneurs, small business, whether I'm talking to someone in developmental services, whether I'm talking to someone, who is a teacher and a parent working from home and doing, all of these pieces. It's a struggle to do the work, but people want to do it, because if you don't, you have the guilt of, you could have done more. You feel that you may have left someone in the lurch, and that's something we'll all have to kind of figure out and handle. And I'm hopeful that when the weather is a little bit nicer, I'm hopeful that people are able to open the windows, get some fresh air, a bit of fresh perspective, and make it through, all of us together separately.
For sure. With all that work, have you had anything that's really stood out to you as like a very positive message, something that's really motivated you through this, like a really big success, would you say?
Um, yes. So first, I would say that it has been. I mean, some of the stories that we hear are heart wrenching, and a lot of stress and pressure on folks who aren't sure if they will be able to continue to do business in our community. Families that aren't sure if they'll be able to, how they'll be able to afford their homes or apartment at the end of this. And we're through this and at the end of this. So there's the heart wrenching stuff. The long-term care pieces are just gut wrenching, but then there is also the heartwarming side of this, where you're hearing unbelievable stories of care and compassion, people going that extra distance to help a neighbor or a friend, the organizations like Caremongers, or what we're seeing downtown with the Backdoor Mission in Oshawa, like holy jumping. They are coming together, connecting with community agencies and forging partnerships that will not just serve us during the time of COVID-19, but through and out the other side, right? And I'm so motivated by that, because these are folks, often volunteers, and they're putting in the full work day out of the goodness of their hearts and recognition that this is what people need. It helps to motivate you to be a part of that. But on a professional level, personal and professional level, I was a part of the call to have General Motors do something with their almost empty plant. There were community activists and Green Jobs Oshawa and just folks who would drive by the plant, who would reach out to our office and say, what could happen there? Instead of nothing, could we do something that makes people safer and better protected? And the answer is yes, of course we could. And I wrote a letter to the Premier, got a lot of good attention for that, got a lot of conversations started broadly across the community, because we had seen General Motors in Warren, Michigan, set something up in just under a week to make masks. And so the call was, well, why couldn't they do that here? Well, they can, and they are. So they partnered with the feds, and now we're going to be soon, hopefully, up and running. And my understanding is making locally 1 million masks a month for Canadians, by Canadians, right? So we as a community are pretty excited about that, I think, and proud that we will be able to contribute, because I think a lot of people feel pretty helpless during this time. So to be able to keep our healthcare workers and frontline workers safer, that we're going to have a made across the street solution, that's awesome. And big numbers. We also, we hear about the face shields that are being made at the university, that our community businesses are stepping up and sewing gowns, or like the craft brewery that is making the hand sanitizer, which I bought a 4-pack. They're now doing curbside pickup, and I was able to get a 4-pack of hand sanitizers, not to be ingested, but
not injected or ingested, eh?
no, to be put in a pump and used, but I mean, these are all good news stories, and they're just going to keep coming, right?
For sure. Wow, like that's 1 million masks a month is very positive news for sure. I mean, are they the
Yep.
surgical style, or are they N95? What's sort of the general spec of these things?
They're not. My understanding is, and again, whether this changes, whether this is, whether there's some flexibility, I'm not entirely sure, but it is masks, not the N95s, but the masks that are being called for by the medical community. And I was talking to folks this morning, and the big need across the sectors, developmental services, across, hospitals and healthcare, are the gowns, right? That there's a real need for those. So we will figure out, that'll be one of our next initiatives, to figure out how we can not just procure more of those, but make more of those. I think we all understand the need to make things not just locally, but domestically. And yes, it's about employment, but it's also that ability to do things ourselves for ourselves, and that resonates locally, where we have phenomenal capacity and workforce and the heart to manufacture and make and create, right? We're kind of awesome here in Durham region. So it'll be important to figure out how we can tap into that and help out all Canadians.
For sure. Yeah, Durham definitely has a lot going for it. Has been a big message of this show so far too, which is great. Um, Now, one thing that maybe Durham doesn't have going for it right now is the broadband internet. And I think we're experiencing a little bit of that now too, with just general Wi-Fi and people having to do Zoom calls from home. It's been a problem. In the last interview I did with John Henry, he was explaining that he had to keep going into the office to be able to do any sort of conference or meeting because his home internet is just not good, and he lives in the core of Oshawa. So, what do you think can be done about that?
Well, thank you for asking. So I have the opportunity to serve the province as the official opposition critic for infrastructure, transportation, and highways. So I was actually on a call this morning, and part of our conversation was about broadband, and that was with one of my MPP colleagues up way north in the far north in Mushkegowuk, James Bay. And the northern members have been calling for a broadband strategy and for help, because of course when we think of perhaps lack of access to internet, we think remote, we think north, we think rural, and that of course hampers businesses, that hampers agriculture, that hampers any of the major industries, in terms of being competitive or even being current. But now with the conversations around education from home and access to resources, whether the high school kids are on, the video calls, or whether it's accessing, books, resources, videos, all of the stuff that we think of, to bring in the resources to the homes. Folks don't have internet. They don't have reliable internet. And that is not just a northern and remote and rural conversation. That is across the province. So to your point, people who live in Oshawa that may not have access to the service that would be what they need, the bandwidth, or the reliability, is a huge problem for an individual, for a family, for businesses. And yes, with the added component of access to education, it's sort of bringing it into sharp relief for people. But it's an all the time issue. Certainly we hear about it from the Association of Municipalities and the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association, these different massive organizations that have been advocating it for years. So the government has said that it's a priority for a strategy. We have yet to see it. We're seeing big partners like Bell have strategies for rural, but then they left out the northern. There's nothing for northern. And when you think about what qualifies as rural, you don't think of in the heart of Oshawa, but in Clarington, all across Durham region, you have challenges to access. But something else I will say that's a massive challenge to access is affordability. I used to teach in the south end of Oshawa, and the families there, they didn't have the financial resources, all of them, to be able to access it. So even if there might have been high speed available, there was also the high cost that accompanied that. And so if we don't have strategies to ensure that people have access, I see that as discriminatory. People need to be able to access it, because I think we all recognize, whether from a banking perspective, a business perspective, an education perspective, personal use perspective, it is the great it's one of the great equalizers right now. Access to information always has been, and right now how we access that information tends to be online. So, how do we come up with a strategy? And anyway, when we get back to the legislature, I don't know when that will be. But as critic, I'll have a 1-hour speech to give on this. So if anybody listening has, thoughts or opinions on access to broadband and infrastructure needs, send them my way, please. I would love to be able to share local voices on this issue, or any issue.
Yeah, for sure. I know quite a few small business owners are in a similar boat too, with just having very expensive internet to be able to run their business in general. Business internet tends to be a little bit more pricey and a little bit less forgiving in these kind of situations too. So I know a few people that will definitely be sending you letters for sure, and I'll hopefully to get some help. Yeah, and with the education coming to home and education being an important part of your concerns in general and your issues, How do you feel currently about the situation with schools and being shut down for COVID, and kind of what the outlook seems to be?
I know it's been really challenging for folks to sort of, it's been difficult the way that it has been decided, that it was sort of the wait and see, the wait and see, the wait and see. I think some people anticipated that it would, that we would find ourselves here with essentially, getting to the summer without going back to school, and others did not anticipate that there has sort of been a different expectation. So unfortunately, things hadn't been necessarily communicated in the way that was easiest on families. However, here we are, and we find ourselves hearing from educators and the school board, and from teachers who are working pretty darn hard to provide some level of education and access to that. Certainly appreciating the challenges we just talked about with access to broadband and the internet, but also it's very difficult to hear an announcement, for example, provincially, that there would be all of these laptops, but those laptops were already ones that had been, the boards had already paid for those, had already distributed those, or were distributing those, that those were not new laptops. So there's been a challenge for people who don't have access to the technology or the tools. But I know that the teachers are very sincere in doing the work. Many of them are parents themselves, so there's an added challenge there. Board to board, there have been some pieces that differ. I've been reading in our local paper that people are hopeful to have some online online classes and whatnot, but I don't know, from what I hear, especially with crashing Zoom and different things that make it very difficult to secure and keep kids kind of safe, so to speak. So there are things for them to figure out, especially as we continue in this, that this is not just a short-term couple of weeks. So people are working together, I know, locally and with the board and the teachers, and I know a lot of parents are doing their darndest, and I'm so grateful, when I hear that, and of course they are, but it is a challenging time. So I'm hoping that with the nicer weather, that the kids will have maybe the ability to do gym class on a front porch or a balcony, or maybe backyard, or whatever that looks like. But we all need a little bit of warmth and fresh air, I think.
Yeah, especially on a rainy day like this, it's definitely got that overtone, I think, of everything that's been happening.
Has it been extra cold and rainy, or is it just that I'm paying attention because we're all so desperate to have a little bit of sunshine, and it's just been so cold. And I know it's only April. It's almost May. We're almost there.
Well, I mean, speaking of how close we are to May, this is an issue that's been really bugging a lot of people in my circle, which is the start of next month for commercial rent and rent in general.
Yes.
That's a huge challenge. I think even with the announcement of the new program to support landlords and then hopefully pass that on to tenants in some way, there's some questions about whether landlords are obligated to implement that, what that's going to do for businesses. And even in my plaza alone, there's a lot of people that have kind of got some question marks about whether things are going to go down that path, or whether they'll be able to take advantage of that program, or whether they're going to be left in the lurch. It seems like the biggest challenge right now is definitely these hitting these rental milestones, and even personal rent people who have to pay rent for their actual homes or their apartments, and having a hard time even with the CDRB or other benefits to be able to try to stick it out. So do you have any kind of insight into what's going on there, or what might happen?
I don't know that I have insight. I certainly have the local perspective, because I have regular phone calls with the chamber and the downtown BIA folks. We're hearing from businesses sort of through them. A few have reached out directly, because I think, to your point of the different announcements or different programs, it has been very challenging for businesses to navigate those, or to figure out not just what they qualify for, but what is worth applying for, because they're trying to figure out, well, there's been a lot to figure out. And with many of them being federal. My office does a lot of referring people kind of to the federal side of things. We're learning a little bit about that, but we do work well with our local MP's office to kind of share some of those concerns and refer folks. But anyone who is in the community, whether they are chamber members or not, I know that the chamber is inviting everyone to reach out to them so that they can benefit from the resources that they're gathering, the knowledge and information that they are, amassing and doing their best to distribute. We're fortunate in the Durham region to have the Durham Economic Task Force, like investdurham.ca is having webinars that's based on what they're hearing from businesses across the region, like what's needed, whether that's sort of converting to or getting online and doing things on an online platform if they haven't already. But I mean, these are strategies that have been made locally, trying to figure out how to help businesses put one foot in front of the other. What I'm hearing, regardless of whether it's sort of a really like a small local Main Street business or one of larger differently established businesses, is that there is a need for the direct support, and that has been a need from the beginning. That it's one thing, that deferrals have a place, like tax deferrals have a place in the provincial strategy, but it really does kick the can down the road, and businesses need direct funds and direct support now, or they won't be there down the road to kick that can, right? It's not just that it's very stressful. Our small businesses are the heart and soul of our communities from an employment standpoint, but also that, your community identity is your downtowns or your businesses, and everyone wants to find a way to support them. So there needs to be that side of it. How do we get your goods and services to market when the market is at home on their couch or in their backyard? And also, how do we ensure that those businesses are there when we get back to some kind of next phase of this, right? That is out of our homes. So I've written a 3-page letter, on behalf of the downtown BIAs, and it was asking for supports with clarification on language around curbside pickup. If a business isn't deemed essential, there are a lot of questions about whether or not they're able to use these tools like curbside pickup and contactless pickup. On the frequently asked questions page, it says no in no uncertain terms, but then elsewhere in the regulations, there is some room to navigate and maybe differently interpret. So we've called for clarification. Things need to be fair. Businesses need to have a fighting chance. We've called for programs to continue, like Digital Main Street, which was a provincially funded grant program that helped businesses get online. It was really successful, and then that stopped actually pre-pandemic, but we're calling for them to bring that back, or other programs that will not just inject the money, but inject the resources into our communities, right? So there's May 1st is going to be, I don't know how people are going to sleep tonight knowing that, that rent is due when they don't have it. And I would ask businesses to connect with the organizations and sort of make sure that their voices are heard and that people know their current situation, because if there is something that they could qualify for that they are unaware of, we want to do our best to connect them. But unfortunately there's a lot that hasn't happened yet that has to in order to keep our businesses from folding and disappearing.
For sure.
Yeah.
I know, especially with deferments, you're kind of just like loading the jack in the box, waiting for that minute when all of those payments come around, in addition to your now regular operating costs, and you're just kind of making things a lot harder at the end of the road. And that's something that a lot of us have been working on here too. Just, your interest payments get deferred on whatever your long-term debt is, and then suddenly now you're paying your deferred payments plus your regular payments plus. Yeah. So it does kind of compound.
Well, it's a huge worry too, because as community folks, everybody is wondering, about their own employment situation, their own financial situation, whether that's that you've seen your money take a hit in the market, whether that's a matter of you don't have your wages coming in week to week, that you're not going to necessarily, like, very few will come out the other side of this in a better financial position. I don't know who would, and so we will all come out the other side in some way or another, and we will want to invest in our communities. We will want our businesses to do well. We will want to be able to spend money and participate in our communities and economy. But there are many folks that won't know how they'll do that. So we have to factor all of this in, because when we are able to recover and look at that stage, and when we are able to, reopen in phases and whatnot safely, there's not going to be a mad rush of people through the door. So how do we kind of stagger expectations? How do we do that? And it's going to have to be thoughtful and careful so that it can become permanent. But it has to be realistic. You can't just sort of, when you take your foot off that balloon and say, okay, everything's back to normal, I don't know that there will be a back to normal. And that we have to be listening to businesses and working directly with them. For sure.
Now, maybe on a more positive note, you're at home, you've got your kids that have been home forever, your internet is really spotty, you got nothing to do, it's really hectic. What have you been doing media-wise to get through this and stay sane? What's your kind of stay sane strategies? Do you have any tips?
So I definitely don't have kids. That's part of how I stay sane, is I just borrow the neighbor's kids. So they come and give me a hard time and make my day a little brighter sometimes. My neighbor does a fair bit of baking, and I get to benefit from that. So I'm a very, very lucky little girl when it comes to that. What do I do to stay sane? This sounds so, I am really grateful that I have a role in this. Like, I'm really grateful that I have not just a job, but the job that I have, the role that I have is responding to real world concerns, and not just complaints, but needs, right? And so I'm glad to have a place in this to be helpful, or do my best to kind of get people what it is that they need, because I know so many are struggling with it being a challenging, like, there's a helpless feeling, or sort of that inability to get answers. So that helps me to get through this, that I do wake up in the morning and I know that I have work to do. And I'm grateful for that. I don't take downtime normally. Like, I'm not wired well, I think, for balance. But I have set up in my basement, I've got all of my little pots for all of my seedlings, and my little cucumbers and tomatoes and different plants that I have been growing from seed. And I finally got some grow lights, and I got grow lights that are just for seedlings. So there's no story there beyond vegetables. But I'm looking forward to getting those in the ground when I can. And I've always been a bit of a nerd gardener, so I like to know all about all sorts of interesting heirloom vegetables and plants and herbs and whatnot. And so that's something that I'm working on. Yeah, I've been shying away from Netflix and TV right now, because isn't it strange that when you watch a show that you used to love and you think, oh, they're all standing too close, or you watch a show now and you think, well, that's an unrealistic plot line. There are more than 6 people in that room. So yep. It's hard to relate to some of the things. But anyway, I should probably do more reading. That's what I should probably do.
I'm sure there's some great plant books out there too. I don't know if that's
you read things better. Okay. Yeah. Play some online board games.
I'm all for that, for sure.
Well, okay, so I'm going to turn this back on you. Yeah. What do you recommend? So I've got as much or more nerd in me as most folks. I miss my Settlers of Catan, and I know that there's some online versions of that, but tapping into a community of other folks, you should help to coordinate some of that online, because I've been playing way too much Scrabble, and I don't like Scrabble. so yeah,
definitely, it's tough.
Help us out, Andrew.
I'll do my best. I mean, there is a movement for getting into these online groups like Discord. I don't know if you've heard of Discord, but it's like a chat server. Originally, it was meant for video games, but they're really opening up now because people are just figuring out what to do. And so creating a community online to be able to play board and card games. And there's really good
Yeah.
virtual versions of games like Asmodee does an amazing job porting their games to online. So there's Ticket to Ride, which is the video game version of it, is great. If you've heard of Tabletop Simulator, it's a really fun
I
way to play
I
board
I
games.
have not, but I just watched your face light up, and I know the folks on radio can't see that.
It's really good. You can play pretty much any game, and even some games that aren't out yet. They've got a really awesome system for that. So if you're looking for board gaming, it's a good way to go, and it's not very expensive.
Well, I I kind of am. I started playing chess with a friend, and then I stopped playing chess with a friend because I realized I am no good at chess. Nor do I think that there's potential for me to be good. But I would very much like some recommendations. So, after this, you can feel free to email me some links, because I have some time, in the evenings, that since I'm not watching TV anymore.
Yeah, you gotta win at some train placement. I get it. It's totally. I'll send you a long list. And so the last question I like to ask, is I do want to be conscious of our time, is who you think I should speak to next? Who do you think would be a good person to get out to the community, who's got some good perspective on what's going on and information?
I would love for you to speak with Counselor Giberson. So Derek Giberson, who has been really working sincerely with teams of people at the Backdoor Mission. And I know that there are wonderful success stories about the different not-for-profits and people doing some of the frontline care work. But when I've talked to him, I've always been impressed with, he's connected to so many different places. And I think that having a conversation with Counselor Giberson would be really interesting for people to know what it looks like downtown, what it could look like, because they're responding to the immediate need, but also planning for the next chapters for us as a community. I think that would be a good conversation. So you'll have to, good luck, pinning him down, though. Our times for talking have been like at 10 and 11 at night, because the work never ends.
Oh yeah, that's
for him.
That'll be a good mission. I will definitely chase down him and see what they're up to. So thank you very much for your time today, Jennifer. This was a great chat, and I really appreciate you sharing all this information with everybody. So thank you for
Well, thank you
participating.
very much, Andrew, and thank you for all you do. And wash your hands, don't touch your face, and good luck with everything. And of course, you and anyone else across Durham region that has any questions, to reach out to my office at any time, to phone or email, to keep us in their loops, and make any suggestions or share any concerns.
For sure. We'll definitely put all of your info in our show notes so people can contact you easily. Awesome.
Thank you.